I thank you guys for being here. Okay, you guys are on Facebook Live and we've been recorded, okay? Let's share my screen here. I like to share the rules. Okay, so these are rules for our viewers. We're gonna have respect everybody. We may not agree with everything that's been said. However, we just need to be mindful and be respectful of everyone. So today our topic is emptiness, deciding when to leave. Most of the time we stay in relationship for whatever reason. And on top of that, it's people who cohabit, they don't get married, they live together and there's no benefit. So today I have John Knocklinger, did I pronounce it correct? He was a divorce attorney. Now he's running his own business, helping men how not to lose everything during a divorce. I know you women are going to get upset, but we have to do the men too. We know there's women who take everything, right? So let's do the right thing. Okay, John, you can tell them a little about yourself and what you do. And also, before I do that, we have the tax guy on. So you know what? With divorce comes money, right? And actually, I have two tax experts on here. But Mr. Husband is, I think that's his specialty. He's been on a while back, giving you guys tips. So with that, let's hear from John.
Thank you so much for having me. So I have been a divorce attorney for almost 20 years. And in that time, I've been a part of over 1,500 divorces. And sort of the next chapter of my life has been to help men navigate the pre-divorce and divorce process so that they can feel like they've got someone in their corner. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to answer any questions that everyone has and be part of this really nice conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Husband, where are you? Husbands, is he on?
I'm sorry, I got pressed something, but I'm fine. I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
I have been practicing accounting for probably the last 35, 40 years, providing advisory services for individual small and mid-sized businesses, as well as tax compliance in regards to corporations, all types of business entities, and pretty much covering the whole gamut of tax services, except for forensic accounting or forensic issues. But we also get involved in audits of nonprofit organizations and providing services to startup entities, so on and so forth. So we pretty much cover a whole spectrum of services in that accounting industry.
So also, how about family? Like, Mr. John is on here and he's going to talk about divorce. And, with that comes an expense on both sides. So are you able to, give us information on that? Tax and relationship?
Well, yes. Now they've changed the law, I believe. I believe when they changed the law back in '86, where now excuse me, you don't get tax on your income from your former spouse, and they no longer get to deduct that cost anymore. The only thing that before that was exempt from taxation was child support, but alimony is no longer taxable income. If the decree started, I believe, after 2018, and it's no longer deductible by the by the taxpayer who pays the alimony. So those things have made a dramatic change, because a lot of times people would get alimony and they do not make provision for the taxes that would occur on that money. And at the end of the year, they're hit with a large tax liability. So these things have changed. A lot of times also, the settlement that you would develop between yourself and your ex is determines how things can be taxed in the future. So if you get a full settlement, that will become taxable previously in the current year that you received it. You can spread it over the years. So a lot of times that became part of the agreement, how you're going to minimize the taxes that you would have to pay on that income that you get from alimony. So those things have changed in the last few years, where, as I said, the taxpayer who pays the alimony no longer gets to deduct it, and you who receive it no longer pays taxes on that income. But that would have to be a post 2018 settlement agreement.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's hear from John. Give us some enhanced enlightenment.
Oh, that's a tall order, Beverly. Actually, what's really interesting is obviously not only am I a divorce attorney and divorce coach, but I'm actually going through a divorce myself right now.
Wow.
So it is, this topic that you have tonight is actually very relevant to me in terms of deciding when to leave. Now, most of the people, I would tell you, Beverly, that call my office, this fear is in the back of their heads somewhere. Is this the time for me to leave? Is my marriage over? What should I do? Regardless of why, and I see on the screen all these, a bunch of reasons why you might have some fear about, entering into this divorce process. But, at the end of the day, all of these things that I see right here, that I know we're going to go through as the night progresses, in terms of what your partner is like, what's going to happen with your kids, what's going to happen with your money, what a judge might do, is it going to be fair? All of those things are really just reasons to be fearful of the future. And, I like to say it's the lies we tell ourselves to stop ourselves from doing something that's scary. And it could be divorce, but it could be anything else, a new career, starting a new business, whatever it is. We tell ourselves these stories. And, we may legitimize why we think it's a very legitimate reason that we're not doing something. For example, I'm not getting divorced because, it's going to cost so much in alimony. Let's take a man who's getting divorced and saying, I don't want to get divorced because I'm going to have to pay alimony. The fact of the matter is, yes, you might have to pay alimony, but you're staying in a marriage that isn't fulfilling you. You're staying in a marriage that is not making you happy. You're staying in a marriage that is teaching your children what an unhealthy relationship looks like. So, whenever we're looking at these reasons for getting divorced or not, I think a lot of people sort of, they focus in on something that's not really the real reason. And so a funny story about myself is the second I decided to get divorced myself, I called my best friend and told her that I want to get divorced. And I said, you have to hold my feet to the fire. And whenever I give, and she's a divorce attorney, just so you guys all know, I said, whenever I give you one of the bullshit reasons that all of our clients give to us about why they don't want to get divorced, you literally have to drive to my house and slug me across the face. Because that's really what it is. Deep down inside when your marriage is over. You really do. And you may want to fight for it for any number of reasons, maybe religious reasons, maybe family reasons. But at the end of the day, we only live once. And I think where I ended up was, you only live once. And if you're not happy, marriage is not a failure. And I think that's sort of where a lot of people sort of start, is that marriage is a failure of some kind. But it really is, in a lot of ways, it's just a realization that the relationship has met its end for whatever reason. It might be both of you, it might be one of you, but don't let yourself fall into these stories that you might tell yourself, that if you get divorced, something's going to happen to your kids, or if you get divorced, you're going to be living in a van down by the river. If you get divorced, you're never going to find somebody else. Those are all stories that you tell yourself that stop you from doing what you need to do to move on to the next chapter of your life. And the next chapter of your life may be much better than this chapter of your life. I can keep talking on and on, Beverly, but I'll stop now for a little bit.
Okay, so I just have one question for you. I mean, and based on some of my clients, right? So you don't believe that despite of the situation in the marriage that one should stay because of the children?
So listen, children can see much more than we give them credit for whether a marriage is healthy or not. For example, my parents to this day are still married in their late 60s and are actually early 70s. And they're deeply unhappy. I've seen that since I was 10 years old. And, I got it in my head that staying married was what you just had to do. No one in my family has ever been divorced. I'm going to break new ground here. But I also have seen what happens when you're deeply unhappy. I mean, my grandparents, who were alive into close to 90, they hated each other. Like there was no love. They literally did not love each other. And I mean, that was clear whenever my grandmother died. I could see from my grandfather, he was sad, but it was really hard for me to see. And I think we all need to realize that our children see more than we give them credit for. They see that marriage they see what marriage should be. And marriage should be something where you are deeply fulfilled, deeply, not like ecstatic, seeing hearts all the time, but you should be fulfilled. You should feel really good about the person you're with. And if you're not, if you're fighting, if you're exuding negativity, your children are going to see that. And guess what? They learn that. They learn that is what a relationship is supposed to be like. And I think it behooves all of us to kind of step back and think, what are we teaching our children? And, are you staying married just for your kids? Because if that's the only reason you're staying married, my opinion is that is a shitty reason to stay married, if that's the only reason. Now, if you think, anyway, that's just how I feel about it.
So based on that, I work in the school system and I see what divorce does to children. So based on what you're saying it's okay to, let's put ourselves first and not our children, and that they would live through whatever repercussions that separation or divorce do to them.
Well, because Beverly, the issue here is, how do the parents deal with the divorce? The reason children get damaged in a divorce is because their parents don't approach divorce the right way. I mean, just the fact that parents separate does not damage children. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. I've divorced so many people over the years, and I've kept up with all of, many of them after divorce. Their children have been fine, but the ones that have been fine are the ones whose parents approach divorce in a responsible way, in an amicable way, in a way where they kept their children's well-being front and center. The ones who get screwed up are the ones whose parents, all they do is talk crap about the other parent. All they do is spew negativity. They have a divorce that goes on for years. It's all about, the evil person over here or the evil person over there. If you don't do that, divorce does not screw up kids. And that is something that I have seen over and over again.
Okay. So the information that I have here on the screen is what I got from the things that you have posted. So when you put here, the fight for your children never ends, what exactly do you mean by that?
So, you get divorced and, that is a point in time. And that's something I tell all of my clients. Let's say your child is 6 years old when you get divorced. That's a point in time. Your child's going to get older. I think all of you that are on this, that are on this right now that have children know that your children's wants and their needs and their desires change a lot between the ages of 6 and 10, 10 and 14, 14 and 18. So a lot of people, they have the fight for whatever custody arrangement they want or whatever time sharing they want without really thinking about the fact that all of that effort is just based on this point in time. And it's going to change and change again and change again. So when I say the fight for your children never ends, is that you have to recognize long-term what's going to be going on. And you need to at least be cognizant of the fact that your children's needs change and they change again and they change again. And so whatever it is you're fighting for, you've got to at least be flexible in your own mind about what that's going to look like long-term. And yes, it might mean that every year you need to reevaluate things, that every 4 or 5 years you need to fight again for your kids. But you can't just decide when your kids are young, here's what I'm going to do, and that's it. You have to continuously fight for your kids throughout their lives.
Okay.
So John, when you say fight for your kids, what do you mean? Because it could be fighting for your kids to see them, or it could be fighting not to pay what you paid when your children was 5 or 6 or 10, and now they're 18 years old and their needs are different. So what are you supposed to fight for in the name of your children at these stages in their lives?
No, that's an excellent question, Carmen. I'm not talking about money. And I realize that a lot of times when people enter divorce, when they enter into custody disputes, a lot of it is guided by money. But what I'm really talking about, let's bring it back down. What we're talking about is what's in the children's best interest, all right? When children are young, their best interests are served by having frequent contact with both parents. Every psychologist will tell you that. And as they get older, their best interests are guided by stability, having the same schedule every single week, because that promotes their ability to learn and to have a social life and all those sorts of things. So when it comes to fighting, it's really fighting to make sure that your children are making sure your children are front and center. And what that means is understanding that sometimes that means you don't see them as much. That's what it might mean. If your children are served by being in one house Monday through Friday, it might mean one parent doesn't see them as much. And fighting for your kids means fighting for what they need, not what you need, what they need. And most of the time where the big fights happen are where people lose sight of the fact that it's about your children, not about you. Because when it's about you versus your ex-spouse. And it's about who's winning that battle. In terms of money, listen, child support, I say this all the time, child support, whoever's receiving it says it's never enough, and whoever's paying it says it's way too much. You know, as a parent of a child, I don't think child support is nearly enough. But the fact of the matter is, people do try to weasel out of paying a certain child support by arguing that they should have certain time with their kids. And that's just sort of, you know, that's part of the reality of, unfortunately, the court system. But that's where having a good attorney comes into play, where you can have an attorney say, okay, so you want, you know, I'm going to say mom. I'm not going to stereotype it. Let's say mom's not the one that has custody. Mom, you want a certain number of days per week. Okay, well, as long as you have those days per week, here's the child support obligation. But if you, after 30 days, don't have those number of days, then we're going to change your child support obligation. And so that's a way to deal with that. But I'm a big fan of separating money from the kids. And anyone who comes into my office will tell you that if you bring up money before we've decided the schedule, you will virtually get smacked by me, because they should never be the same. Your schedule is what's in the best interest of the kids, what's good for them. And that's really what you should be focusing on.
Right. I think you honed in on the money, but my question was fighting for the children for what and when and what stage? Because as a parent, if I am going through a divorce and I believe that my kids are getting hurt by visitation, as much as I want to see my children, I don't want to see my children to grow up seeing me and their father arguing. So if you want to go with that, go with that. The day you want to come, you come. I don't need a judge telling me when or when I cannot, or my ex-husband can or cannot see the children. I think we have, as grown adults, for God's sake, need to come to the point where we do not need a judge to tell us when we could parent our children. But that's just my thinking.
No, I again, as a parent of a child, I think that point of view is very salient. I think that you have to understand that most cases, well, you talk about a judge, most cases, judges do not make decisions. They might make temporary decisions. It's very, very rare that a judge actually makes a decision, particularly in a divorce, about where the kids are going to be and when. It's very common that the parents reach an agreement. You know, in New Jersey, and I don't know where everyone is right now, but in New Jersey, 97% of all divorces are settled. So it's very rare for a judge to actually make decisions. So I hear this a lot, Carmen, in terms of parents. You know, parents are looking at their ex-spouse and, you know, thinking about whether or not their children should really be with their ex-spouse. But, you know, one of the things that's really important for everyone to remember is that if you're the parent of primary residence, if you're the parent the children are living with the most, you have a responsibility to try to foster the relationship between the kids and the other parent. Now, if the other parent, there's something wrong with them, they've been abusive, they have a drug or alcohol problem, that's not what we're talking about, all right? We're talking about just a parent that doesn't have any discernible issue, just somebody that parents different from you or just didn't have the same interest in the children that you did. You have a responsibility as the parent of primary residence to try to convince the children and try to encourage them to go see their other parent. And that is something that is usually lost, because what people get caught up in is this whole me versus this other parent. and they look at the other parent and say, well, I think the other parent have these number of issues. The kids didn't really like this other parent, but they don't take any personal responsibility for, are they responsible for the way the children feel about the other parent? And so that's really where judges, that's why judges rule the way they do, because we all in the legal system have seen that, you know, children do follow the parent that they're most bonded to. So let's say they're bonded to mom. They're going to pick up on mom's cues a lot about dad. Now, dad might be a horrible person, but let's assume dad's not a horrible person and dad's just somebody who, you know, despite the fact he wasn't present during the marriage, now after the, you know, it post-divorce wants to be a dad. The children are going to pick up on the cues if mom's like, no, you're not. You're not going to, what are you talking about? You're not going to be, you weren't around the whole marriage. They're going to pick up on those cues. But the problem is that judges have a responsibility to try to get dad to be a dad. And mom, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you look at it, has a responsibility under our law to try to foster that relationship.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for John?
Well, I have a couple questions. I guess I'll do them like one at a time. So say, because you said it's not a money issue. So say if the parent who has custody of the children, say if the other parent, say if the parent who has custody of the children makes more than a parent that doesn't have custody of the children, how would that work in terms of alimony if the parent who has the majority of the income and has control of the children, or I shouldn't say control, but who's in more contact with the children, how does alimony work in that situation?
So the way that alimony works, again, I'm speaking in New Jersey. I don't know, Beverly, are most of these people in New Jersey that are on this call? Do you know?
Yes, mostly.
Okay, so then I'll assume you all are in New Jersey. So New Jersey alimony law is factor-based, even though if you talk to most attorneys, they'll tell you it's got an unwritten formula. And in terms of custody, so it's really interesting. I'm going to answer this question as quickly as I can. I could give like a 5-hour seminar on this, but you know, when we look at custody and alimony, the interrelationship is kind of interesting because parental responsibility is a factor, but we all know that if you have primary responsibility for children, your earning capacity is affected. So it's really two parts of the analysis, because if you have primary kids, you're probably not going to be earning as much. I'm generalizing. And you're going to have a lot more responsibilities, you know, having to take time off work when the kids are sick and so forth. But I will tell you, generally speaking, our alimony law really doesn't take that into account all that much. So I'm going to bring in that formula that I just told you doesn't really exist, but it does. So I know Eric is actually Mr. Cousins, who was talking about how the alimony tax law has changed. Since it's changed, our formula has kind of changed a little bit, and now alimony is approximately 22 to 26% of the difference in people's gross incomes. That's about what alimony typically turns out to be now. And the reason I throw that out there is just to go back to the original question and just to tell you that whether or not you have kids really doesn't even matter anymore. It should, because it is important to throw that out there, but it really it really shouldn't matter. And even if you make more and you have, so I guess your question was, if you make more and you have custody, it doesn't matter that you have custody. If you make more than the other person, there would never be an alimony obligation to you. It just wouldn't exist. What we're really looking at when we look at alimony is earning capacity, the history of the marriage, what your standard of living was, and is there a need to move money from one person to the other? And really, usually it's pretty obvious. Let's say you've been married for 10 years, one person makes 100, the other person makes 50,000. That is going to be an alimony case in every circumstance, regardless of where the children are living. So, alimony is one of those things where in New Jersey, it's different in other states, but in New Jersey, if there's a disparity in income between the parties, I would say at least like 15, 20% of a disparity. But if there's a disparity, there's probably going to be alimony, or at least an argument for alimony, because not everyone actually pursues alimony. But there's going to be an argument for alimony, and the fact that the children are living with one parent or the other, I will tell you, in reality, doesn't come into play. That's why I started by telling you that under the factors, it should come into play, but in reality, it really doesn't.
All right, so John, all right, so let me be more specific. So maybe if I give you a specific case, maybe it'll make more sense. So I have a coworker. He's approaching retirement age. I think he'll be 62 in March. He married his children's mother when they were, I guess, mid-20s, I'm guessing. They were married for 10 years. They have 2 children. Both children are now in college. So because he's a teacher, I think he's making like $90,000 a year. His wife, because he was making $90,000 a year, she never, ever since they got divorced, she never decided to get another job. So now it's not even a thing where it's like 100,000, 50,000. Now it's like 90,000, nothing. So, so then his story is crazy. So now she decides that she don't ever want to get married because she's getting alimony from him, even though she has a boyfriend. So the whole situation is crazy. So both his children, I think one graduated college, the other one is in college currently. And he was thinking, well, once the younger one turns 21, that'll be it for alimony. So he recently went to an attorney because he wants to retire, and because he's thinking that the alimony is going to end because now the older child is 21. So the advice that his attorney gave him is that the only way that he's going to get away from alimony is if she no longer is on this earth. And that's the kindest way to put it. So in a situation like that, how would that work?
Well, first of all, my man, you got to have that guy call me, not whatever attorney that he called. But anyway, so there's a lot to unpack here. Okay. So, alimony is one of those things that, I don't know what kind of alimony he's paying. If he was only married for 10 years, is that what you said? 10 years that he was married?
Correct. 10 years.
So he's not paying unlimited alimony. We call it, there's no such thing as permanent alimony anymore. Technically, we changed the law. But there is unlimited duration alimony. So it's where the duration just doesn't end. I will tell you that under our law that you have a presumption that you can retire at age 67 or full Social Security retirement age, whatever that is for you. So this guy definitely can retire. I think you say he's 62. So 62 wouldn't be enough. He would have to probably wait until he's 66 and a half or 67.
No, so he's been a teacher for roughly 35 years. So he has those years in. So I don't know in terms of other things that he's doing, but he has the amount of years to retire as a teacher.
Yeah, well, that's not going to carry the day. I mean, it's really about his age, and that presumption just came into effect in 2014. Before that, you had to convince a judge that you should be retiring. Like, if you could still talk and walk and breathe, most judges said you should still be working. It was horrible. So they changed the law. So at least at a certain age, people could retire and not have to prove why they don't want the obligation. But, once he gets to age 60, whatever his full Social Security retirement age is, he will be able to retire at that point without having to prove why he's retiring. And that's the way the law is set up. Is it fair? No. But the fact of the matter is, I know he's a teacher, but there's a lot of cops and firefighters and other people who retire really young, in their 50s. Judges don't buy that. They just don't buy that. Even if they're saying that was my plan all along, was only to work for 20 years or 25 years. Judges really don't buy that because of the fact that once you're divorced, you can't rely upon the plans you made while you were married, because now you're divorced. And so now it's a whole different ballgame. So this guy, unfortunately, I don't think, and quite frankly, the other part of this that you just threw out there was that she's cohabitating. And cohabitation is a very interesting thing because it is a way to terminate alimony even if someone doesn't get married. And there's a whole way to do that. And that's why private investigators get involved quite frequently in our cases, where we can actually find that someone's cohabitating and at least put them on the defense that, you're skirting around alimony by not getting married, but you're cohabitating with somebody. They're helping to support you. And there's definitely another way that maybe he can get rid of this alimony obligation, but it's definitely not because of his age.
So what you're saying is I need to give him your number.
Yeah, give him my number. Let's get this guy going. By the way, I don't know if I haven't said this already. I hate alimony. I hate it with all my heart. I see people come in who are married for 3 or 4 years, tell me they should get alimony, and I want to literally bitch slap them across the face because I cannot stand hearing people say that. I cannot imagine how you can look at yourself in the mirror and think after only 2 or 3 years, your life has changed so much that you should be asking for alimony from somebody. But in New Jersey, that's the case. So I'm definitely think that, as you were talking about this, you were talking about the wife who didn't earn zero. I'll tell you right now, no judge in New Jersey buys that, buys zero. I joke around a lot that most judges in New Jersey think that a stone can make 25 or 30 grand a year. So most people, even if they're not working, judges will already assume they can make at least 25 or 30 grand a year. So, the fact that she's earning zero is really, to me, irrelevant, because really she should be making more. And if she's not been making anything, unfortunately, that's not going to deal with his alimony now, because that's something that should have been handled when he got divorced. But it will certainly come into play when we're looking at cohabitation, because if she's earning zero, the alimony is not enough to support her. So she must be being supported by somebody else. Somebody else must be offsetting her expenses. And that's where your friend's emphasis and his attention needs to go.
Then the other question is, prenuptials. What do prenups protect you from in case of a divorce?
So the primary reason for a prenuptial agreement is to is to protect your premarital assets. That's the main reason you should be getting a prenup. So for example, you get married and you already have a house and a car or a retirement account or a pension, or a bank account, whatever the case is. You're getting you're getting married, so you actually want to protect those things so that, oh my gosh, there's so much happening on the screen right now. So you want to protect those things. And so prenup can do that. You can agree that, let's say you own a house before you get married. You can agree that regardless of how much you commingle that, in other words, how much you and your current, your new wife or husband put into that property, it's still going to be yours if you get divorced. You can agree that a pension, you know, I say this a lot to cops because cops are really keen on, you know, it's my pension. I don't want my spouse to have any of it. But that's only something you can deal with in a prenup. You can agree in a prenup that the pension will always be one party's. But you can also deal with alimony. You can agree that there will be no alimony. You can agree that it will only be alimony if we're married for a certain period of time. You can agree to a formula for alimony. I've had people do that. And then the other thing is if you have a company, even a small company, because you know if you get married and maybe you've got that entrepreneurial spirit and you've got a small company, it might be big someday. You can go ahead and agree that that company will always be yours and not ever subject to being divided. So the prenup is unlimited in terms of what you can do. The only thing you cannot do in a prenup is deal with children. You can't deal with custody of kids. You can't deal with child support. You can't deal with college expenses. You can't do any of those things in a prenup because a judge can override all of that. But other than that, you can do everything else in a prenup, but you have to do it exactly the way the law says. Because if you don't follow every single step to do the prenup the right way, it can be easily thrown out.
So, so can you add on to a prenup if you're already married? So say like 5 years into a marriage, one of the parties decide that, okay, they want to start a business. Could the prenup be amended?
So it can. So there's a slightly different standard at that point. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but you definitely can. What I would suggest in that circumstance is just make sure both parties have independent attorneys whenever you're negotiating that amendment. We call that a postnuptial agreement. They happen. And in that situation, you're going to really want to make sure that it's clear that the person that's on the other side of this agreement wasn't under duress. They weren't being forced to sign it. They had their own attorney. So as long as those things are done, it's probably going to be okay. But after you're divorced, judges have a lot more tools in their toolkit to throw out the agreement. That's not to say that they will. It's not to say that it's likely, but it's definitely not as certain as a prenup.
Mr. Dennis, you have a question? Mr. Charles?
Yes, good evening, sir. It was a pleasure listening to you. In our community, I think we are mindful of the fact that fatherless and motherless homes sort of like destroy us, our neighborhoods. And the damage is significant. The social impact of single family homes and so forth. Are you concerned at all that probably there should be an effort or emphasis to de-escalate, maybe to get counseling or try to save the marriage, just to keep the unity intact? Because that is what our society gets or gains its strength from, right? A two-parent household, how many kids, it doesn't matter. It is much better than the father walking away or the mother walking away. I think that is destroying our communities. You have anything to say on that?
Absolutely, Dennis. I could not agree with you more. I do think that people are very quick to get divorced, and I think that's completely wrong. There is something out there that's a relatively new concept called discernment counseling that I hope really takes off and really becomes part of the mainstream. And the whole point of the counseling is it's not marital counseling, but it's really to make sure that people are clear on how they feel about marriage and to put in place a plan on how they're going to work on their marriage. Because what ends up happening a lot of times, as most of you probably know, is one person gets upset about something. And if they're already kind of a hothead or someone who's prone to being, very excitable, they tend to just, go right to a divorce mindset as opposed to taking a step back. So, one thing that is important, and one thing that I think this might be sort of the underpinnings of your question, Dennis, is that I do think that before people get divorced, I would love to see them have to go through counseling. Would love it. I think it's very important. I'll tell you right now, I told you guys that I'm currently going through a divorce myself. Even we were in counseling and we continue to be in counseling because it's not even about saving the marriage anymore. It's about making sure that we are being the best co-parents we can be. It's about being the best, about making sure that we know how to communicate. So what happens in divorce is that people just decide they don't like each other anymore. I hate you. I hate you. And it goes right to that place. And children get caught in the middle of this entire, and I know a lot of people, particularly men, but a lot of people don't think, they have a bad connotation about therapy. They don't want to be in any kind of therapy. But whether you stay married or you don't, because I understand what you're saying, Dennis, but unfortunately, if people are going to get divorced, regardless of what we all want and what we all think. But I really would hope that we can create an atmosphere where at least people recognize that they should at least learn how to co-parent better. And mothers and fathers can really try to understand that both of them are needed in their children's lives. And even if you're not in the same house, if children at least feel that love and they think their parents don't hate each other, it really goes a long way to making them really feel like the family's still intact, even though their parents aren't living together. Because I'm telling you, the fact that parents don't live together does not damage children. What damages children is when the parents hate each other, when the parents are actively, telling the kids, the other parent's horrible, and the children are seeing, or the children are seeing one parent completely having no interest. That's what destroys kids. The divorce itself does not, because let's all be honest here. It's much better for two people who are fighting constantly to not live together than to be in the house yelling at each other, subjecting the children to that atmosphere. So really what we're talking about here is, in my opinion, is not necessarily saving marriages, because not every marriage is a healthy marriage, but really just making sure that we do things to ensure that children are in these healthy co-parenting relationships. And it takes a lot of effort. And that's really where I'm hoping, that's what I do in my work coaching men all over the country. I really teach them about, don't go into that defensive place where, it's man versus woman. Really step back and think about your kids and really, go to your wife and say, listen, we're getting divorced. I want to be the best co-parent I can be. would you agree to, do some kind of co-parenting therapy with me? Would you agree to sit down with me and at least just talk about our kids? We're not talking about money. We're just going to talk about our kids. And I really get in these guys' ears and really try to convince them that that's not a weakness. That's not you giving up. That's not you agreeing that your ex-wife is going to have custody of the kids. But at the end of the day, you've got to be the best father that you can be. And you really need to do that. It's not the advice that people get when they go to attorneys. It's not, because when you go to an attorney, what is it? It's, it's John versus Jane. There's this B between this verses between two names. It's like a fight. It's like, you're in a ring, you're fighting, as opposed to just two people trying to figure out what's best for their kids. And so, Dennis, while divorce should be the last option, I could tell you in my situation, we did counseling for years. So we did everything possible to save it. And, I've been married 16 years, so it wasn't like it was a short marriage. It should be the last resort, but people are going to get divorced. There's nothing we can do to change that. Nothing. But what we can do is try to educate people about how best to protect children when it happens.
Okay, so I have a question for both John and Michael husbands. In terms of, and I was just looking, and it's been a lot of conversations about DMX. When he passed away, his girlfriend had a child, and seems like she cannot get any benefits. So can you talk about that, both as an attorney and as the tax expert?
From a tax perspective, I don't think I can actually answer that. That may be more of an attorney question, because that relationship, the benefits that accrue from that relationship to the child is something would have to be settled between the parents or the adults. The tax consequence is a matter of the agreement that comes between the parties. We do not see anything in the tax law that says you are supposed to get a benefit from this relationship. So until that issue is settled between the parties and what they're supposed to give to any offspring, then only then do we have a tax issue of how that is dealt with regarding the three parties. But aside from that, that becomes more of a legal issue.
Before John speak on the legal issue, I think DMX spoke the fact that he did not protect this woman legally, whether we agree with it or not. He spoke, and he protected her or didn't protect her. That was his decision.
Okay.
Well, so this issue comes up a lot, and I've actually mediated a lot of estate disputes where this sort of thing comes up. And one part of child support that any good attorney would do is demand that as part of your obligation that you have a life insurance component. And it's exactly for this reason. So that if somebody dies and they don't leave anything to a child, at least there's a child support obligation to hopefully, there's at least a life insurance obligation to cover whatever child support may have been paid over time. And that is exactly why having a good attorney, while it might be expensive and it's something that not everyone wants to do, this is why just going into court yourself and just asking for child support can be a problem. Because one of the things that you absolutely need to do is protect your child. And if you don't have that life insurance, what ends up happening is if the payor dies, so in this case, a dad died. If the payor dies and there's no life insurance obligation, and by obligation, I mean something in a court order, not everyone, all of us can get life insurance to name whoever we want to name, right? You have to have something in a court order saying dad has to have life insurance in the amount of X for the child. And if you have that and dad didn't have it when he died, guess what? Now you can get the money from the estate. Those are the cases I've been involved with. You can go get the money then. If that's not in a court order, then all you have is whatever child support obligation there was up to the date of death. Because after that, there is no obligation. Because when mom or dad dies, the child support obligation ends. So it's really important, if you have children and you're separated or you're getting divorced and there's child support, is incredibly important that there be an actual life insurance obligation that's in a court order. That's the only thing that's going to protect you. Other than that, I mean, you guys all know you can disinherit your children at will. I mean, that's not something that, you can do it. So, but if you're a parent on one side of this whole equation, you got to get that life insurance. You have to absolutely have that life insurance.
John, may I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So, sir, that's okay.
Sir.
If you, in your will, decide to say, at my demise, as part of my estate, I want to establish a life insurance policy funded fully from my estate, can that be done for that child?
Well, not in those words. I mean, if you wanted to do that, Michael, you could definitely do that in a different way. But what's interesting about life insurance and retirement assets, and actually bank accounts, anything where you can name a beneficiary, is that those things are really outside the will. They really are. So what I mean by that is, if let's say you have a life insurance policy and you name Beverly as the beneficiary, and you name her as a beneficiary, but in your will, you say that Carmen's the beneficiary of the life insurance policy. Under the way the laws work, Beverly gets the money because the life insurance policy names her. Your will doesn't matter at all. So, you can't just put in a will. First of all, you can't create an insurance policy in your will, but I mean, your will only applies to the things that don't have a beneficiary. So like if you have a 401k, you have a pension, or you have anything like that where there's a beneficiary, that's the person that gets it. If you have a POD, payable upon death on a bank account, that's the person that gets it. If you own a property where it's joint tenancy with rights of survivorship, which a lot of people who are married have, when you die, that's the person that gets it. Those things are totally separate from your will. So that's why it's really important whenever you're looking at, and we're going beyond divorce to estate planning, but it's really important that all of your beneficiaries and everything that's out there are actually the same as what's in your will, because otherwise there's going to be disputes. People are going to fight. And the last thing, I tell this to everyone who I do a will for, you don't want anyone to be fighting after you're dead. I mean, you're dead, so it's not like you're really going to care that much, but you don't want anyone to be fighting. So you need to make sure that your beneficiaries in all these accounts and your will are all the same. But you really, if you put, Michael, to your point, if you put in, I leave a life insurance policy to my child, but you actually have a life insurance policy, and again, Beverly's your beneficiary, well, Beverly's gonna get the money, not your child.
I understand. My question is more along the line of, I am leaving assets and I want to create a policy for that child as a beneficiary. I was just asking the question because the statement was made that the protection of the child is better served with a court order. And I was just thinking, if some person did not go through that process, to some person who's being responsible, I'm saying, no matter what goes on between me and my ex, I'm taking care of my child. So whatever is going on in her life, whatever is going on out there, I'm taking care of my responsibility for my child. So I am going to set up as much to benefit my child as possible with or without her knowledge. But I want that child to benefit from it if it came down to that. And I said, I'm going to leave X amount of money in my will, and I want certain things to be done for that child. It's just a thought that, in reference to your statement, that it's better to have a court order for the life insurance policy for the child.
Yeah, I completely understand the question, Michael. So when I made that comment, it was really to protect the interest of the child. So whoever has custody of the child would want that. You can provide as much as you want to the child in your life insurance policies, in your beneficiary designations, on your retirement accounts, in your will. You can provide as much as you want. I mean, a lot of people love to do that. So when I was talking about it, it was really more of a protection issue, because there's no other way to protect a child than to force somebody to maintain a life insurance policy. So on the other side, if you're doing that in a will, what you're probably going to do is in the will create a trust, which really isn't anything fancy. It's just some language where you can at least make sure that your child doesn't get access to money until a certain age, and somebody else at least is designating what that money is going to be paid for. None of that's super complicated. It really isn't. But the fact of the matter is, if let's say, I'll go the opposite direction so I don't stereotype. Let's say dad has custody and mom is the one that doesn't have custody. She may say, listen, I'm going to put our child in my will, and our child's going to get everything. As the parent, as the primary parent, as dad, I'm telling you, you don't listen to any of that crap. You assume she's going to write this child out of the will. You have to assume that. You have to assume that she's not going to leave anything, and that's why you have to get a court order. And it does, by the way, this doesn't mean a judge orders it. This can be what we call a consent order, where the two of you just agree on something. But you have to get her to, at least on paper with a judge's signature, agree that she's going to at least leave a certain amount of money, so that if she doesn't do what she said she's going to do, you have some way of going after whatever she leaves to get money for this child. Because if you don't do that, you're SOL.
I understand. I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, too often there is a adversary position by parties, and I've seen it time and time again in my life where one parent is decided that they are not going to try to look for what is the best interest of the child, and someone has to say, you know what, no matter what you do or don't do, I'm taking care of my responsibility as a parent. So I'm going to make sure that I do what needs to be done, whether you want to be part of it or you want to agree with it or not. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my child. And so I want to do what I need to do to protect and support my child. And that's aside from what other people might say or do or don't do because of their personal positions. That's the only reason why I broached that topic.
Yeah, and that's, as a father, I would feel the same way. But that whole phrase, trust but verify, I think that's kind of what you got to do when you're dealing with a child. The worst thing that can happen is, a parent dies and they said they were going to leave, their whatever they have to the child, and they ended up leaving it to a new boyfriend or girlfriend. And now this child doesn't have the support. And, and that's not what we want. And so while I'm not saying most parents leave everything to their children, let's be honest, most parents do, especially divorced parents. Divorced parents usually leave everything to their kids. People that are married usually leave everything to their spouse, unless you're very wealthy, and then sometimes you leave money to a bunch of other people and things. But this is not, I'm not trying to disparage anybody. I'm just saying that, like, if you have custody of your kids, one thing you really need to do is just to ensure they're protected. And no one should feel offended about any of this. And I know people get really offended. And they say, well, of course I'm going to leave everything to my kid. How dare you say I wouldn't do it? But what I'm telling you is, when it comes to your kids, you have to protect them. You have to do everything possible to protect them. And that might mean trusting but verifying. So trusting that someone's going to leave everything, but verifying by putting in a court order, just so that you feel very comfortable that that's what's going to happen.
Can I ask something? I think the question Beverly asked was about DMX girlfriend that he was living with for years. She had children for him, and then she passed away. He passed away, and she found out that he left her absolutely nothing. So she's not his wife. He left her nothing in the will. The question is, what recourses does this woman have? And I'm not talking about what he left for his children, because I'm sure his children are well cared for. But what does that mean for her as the woman, as the mother of his children that he never married, that he never left anything for? And is it worth it for women to continuously live with men that they are not married to?
No. No. In fact, in New Jersey, the answer is emphatically no. We changed the law a couple of years ago so that palimony is effectively dead in New Jersey. The only time you even can raise a palimony claim is if you have basically an agreement in writing, or you have something like recorded where somebody says, I'm going to take care of you the rest of your life. The mere fact that someone is paying for you, taking care of you, letting you live in their house, none of that is at all relevant anymore. Judges just don't care, because we changed it where you have to have something in writing, or something like writing. So I say that to tell you that, living with somebody, particularly having kids with them too, because I've had a lot of cases like this where people, in fact, I just finished one where she had 3 children with a guy that she wasn't married to, and she didn't work for almost 8 years, but they never got married. And so here she is, 8 years, no work experience, 3 young kids. I think they're 6, 4, and 2. We all know how difficult it is to work with those age groups. and she doesn't qualify for any kind of alimony or support herself. And it's, you know, I don't find it ever helpful to tell people what they should have done. But I do think that if we educate people that if you're going to have kids with somebody, you're going to live with them, you have to get married. You have to. Or you have to have a written, what we call a cohabitation agreement. You have to have some kind of agreement to protect you. And if you don't do either of those things, to be perfectly honest with you, don't come crying. Because you know what? One of my big things is taking personal responsibility for the decisions you make in your life. And I get so freaking irritated when people get mad at me as an attorney because they're upset about the decisions or decisions they didn't make in their own life. And so you absolutely, if you're going to live with somebody who you're not married to and you're going to depend on them for everything, and something happens and they kick you out,
Emptiness.
too bad, so sad. Particularly in New Jersey. I mean, in New Jersey, you're really in big trouble. But I think that's how most states are starting to go now.
Yes. Also, I have a colleague. He passed away like about a month after he got married. A teacher. He was riding a bike, and unfortunately, he got caught between two vehicles, and he passed away. So when you're a teacher in New York City, you're entitled to 3 years salary. God forbid you pass away while you're on the job, right? And because he wasn't married at the time when he got the job, he put everything in his mom's name, right? That insurance policy that every teacher in New York City gets, right? So it's over, I think it was over $103,000 for 3 years. Unfortunately, he did not put it in his new wife's name because they were newly married. And so his mom ended up getting his retirement, his TDA, and his pension, right? And the insurance of over 300,000 times 3 years, right? And his wife is fighting to get that money. But the judge is saying to her, he did not change it and put it in your name. He had a month, which means he's saying that that's his mother, that's to take care of his mother. So his wife is ending up with absolutely nothing. I think she would get Social Security. So I want to know from you, what recourses does she have? What help?
Where does she? Where is this at?
In New York City. She's in New York. He was a New York City teacher.
So I'm not really familiar with the New York City teacher's pension, but most pensions do have something in their plan documents that if you're married, you have to name your spouse as the beneficiary unless your spouse signs something waiving her right. So
not with UFT. With UFT.
Okay, well, if
right.
that's not the case with this, then it really boils down to so she's always entitled to what we call the elective share of an estate. And unfortunately,
what is that?
So basically, to make a long story short, let's say your estate's $100,000 and your husband dies and leaves everything to a new girlfriend, all right? And you're still married. What that means is even if you do that, the surviving wife would still get 33% of the estate, regardless. It's a protection for a widow or widower. So she would still get $33,000, regardless of the fact that nothing was left to her in the estate. The problem is that only applies to things that, and I'm really getting into weeds now, so I'll be really quick. It only applies to things that go through the probate process. And so things that don't go through it are life insurance policies, pensions, retirement assets. So, you know, in terms of, and I'll tell you right now, I'm not as familiar with New York's procedures, but they're not that different from New Jersey in a lot of respects. But it's very likely that the pension does not pass through probate, which means that the wife would not, the widow would not actually would not really have any arguments. I mean, even the argument that he meant to do it and he didn't do it is speculative. He's dead. We don't, you know, unless there's some evidence of that, you know, unless he wrote something, there's some email or text message or something.
None of those things. And so
Yeah, so it's speculative. It's just, you know, and it's in her interest for the court to find that, right? Because she wants the money. So for all we know, so a judge would have to probably just assume that he did mean to take care of his mom, even though it doesn't make sense that he would leave his wife without it. You know, unfortunately, this is why it's important. While you're young and healthy, I tell people this all the time. You don't wait until you're 60 or 70 to do a will. You do it while you're young and healthy, while you have no health problems, because you want to be clear about what your wishes are on everything, from how you're going to be, you know, how your body's going to be disposed of, whether you're going to be buried or cremated, to how your personal property is going to be divided. You can change your will as many times as you want, but do it while you're young, because obviously people die young all the time, and you want to do it, you know, you want to do it as young as you can. And what's really important in that situation is in his will, if he had written that I want my, you know, I leave my pension to my wife, even though the beneficiary had been different, I think she would have at least been able to go into court and argue that. And again, I don't know New York law that well, but you know, that's at least something that would at least give a judge something to hang their hat on. Without something like that, I mean, I feel bad for this woman, but I got to tell you, there's been a lot of cases in my career where the result is horrible, but that's what the law is, you know, and the law, unfortunately, screws people, gives people windfalls they shouldn't get, but the law is the law, and we have to live by it every day.
thank you.
John, wouldn't it be a little bit more practical to advise new married couples to take care of those things pretty much immediately after they get married, rather than leave it to some future date? At some point, I'll take care of it, where the spouse is, okay, now I'm your wife, let's go over your assets, whatever we have to change for beneficiaries, because in fact, I believe most of those things require, once your marital status changes, you're supposed to change your beneficiaries and update them.
Yeah, it's interesting. The question about the prenup earlier, these things kind of go hand in glove, because in a prenup, you can actually address all of this as well. You can say that we both agree that in our wills, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, whatever those things are, which provides sort of another, something else for you to hang your hat on. Because, you know, if the whole idea is that we're getting married, but we're agreeing that if something happens to one of us, here's what's going to happen, you can put in a prenup, we're going to both do wills that say this. And if you never do, at least you've got a prenup to fall back on. You know, so the problem with just the wills in general is that, you know, whether you're married or not, any one of you can go and change your will whenever you want to. You don't have to tell your spouse. There's absolutely no law that says you have to tell your spouse if you change your will. And that's why people die all the time and their spouses are shocked to learn what's in their will because there's no requirement. But if you get a prenup and in the prenup you both agree what the will is going to say, you have some arguments about the will not being what it should say.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to what I like. I mean, I could say this all night. If you're getting married, we all know. I mean, when you get married, we all know there's at least a chance you're going to get divorced. None of us want it. It's not what you want to think about. But when you get on the freeway to go to work in the morning, there's also a chance you're going to get into a car accident. That's why you have car insurance. I tell everyone a prenup is like car insurance or homeowners insurance. I mean, none of us want our houses to burn down, but we still have homeowners insurance. It is insurance. And part of insurance is we're agreeing what our estate planning is going to look like. And then we're agreeing that if something happens to one of us, we're going to leave everything to the other person or whatever you agree to. That is the only thing that you can hang your hat on. Just, getting married, Michael, and saying, oh, I'm going to do my will and you're going to do your will and exchanging the wills, that should not give anyone any kind of security because either one of you could go right back over to the attorney and say, no, I changed the will again. Do a new will and let me sign it. And that attorney, because of attorney-client privilege, doesn't say anything to your wife or your husband. So the only way to really protect yourself is with a prenup, which is why it's not just for divorce, it's also for estate planning.
My statement was more of along the lines of once you become married at your job and other instances, your beneficiary that you have named previously is updated once your marital status changes. I remember years ago, it was when you first started a job and you named some person as a beneficiary and your marital status changed, you automatically were required to update your beneficiary on your insurance or whatever it is that you signed with regards to those things. So what I was referring to is that the advice to newlywed is you need to change your wife as your husband as your beneficiary, as opposed to just letting things sit and hope that nothing happens down the road or you forget about it to be taken care of immediately.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's what you should do. Second you get married, you should sit down and do all of those things. Of course, no one does. But that's definitely something you should be doing because you're right. I mean, it's the kind of thing, if you don't do it when you're thinking about it, people forget to do it and then something happens to somebody. Yeah. And, like the person we were just talking about earlier, who was just married for a very short period of time, they die. So I do think, Michael, that is a great piece of advice is you get married, go on your honeymoon, and then the day you come home, you sit down with all your forms and change everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great piece of advice.
Or even before you go on your honeymoon.
Well, ideally, yes. I mean, so sometimes that's not feasible depending on what people do, but
I know.
yeah, I mean, that is very important.
Yeah, I have a question. As a parent, let's suppose I'm a parent and I have 3 homes and I plan to leave them for my children, for my son. And let's suppose my son is dating someone, but I do not want that person, in case of a divorce, to end up with the properties that we owned before my son even met this person, but I want my son to have the property. How do I go about making sure that my son's fiance, future wife, doesn't end up with 3 family homes?
So Carmen, as long as if he dies before her, you can do that. I'm sorry, if she
No,
dies,
let's suppose
yeah, if he dies
here.
before her, you can do that. Because what's going to end up happening here is you can put in your will that if he's not alive whenever you die, you can have it go to somebody else. But if the only way for you to protect those properties if you die and he's still alive is to put them in a trust. And
I'm listening for my friend.
Yeah, it's kind of, you always have to wonder like why you're doing these things, because let's assume that this a child and his future wife have children. At some point, you might like, I think what we all do a lot of times is we think in the short term, like, yes, my child's getting married and I don't want things to be left. Something happens to me, I don't want this new person that my child just got in a relationship with or just married to inherit things. But sometimes you have to think about, well, what if they're together for 20 years and they have kids? And, would you still feel the same way? I always feel like wills are very organic, and you have to remember to update them all the time. You have to update them based on the circumstances, and people don't. A lot of times what people do is you know how many times people die in their 60s or 70s and they still have guardianship language in their agreements about their minor children who have been they're 40 years old? It happens all the time because people do not update their wills. And so, but to answer your question though, I'm kind of going off the path. The only way to really protect her would be to protect the properties from her would be to put them in a trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the only way, because if you just leave them to him, then they're his.
Right.
And whatever and then at that point, he can do whatever he wants to with them.
That's correct.
Okay. So for a friend, and it goes to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren.
Well, you can always bypass a child. No one has to leave anything to your kids. There's no requirement of doing that. You
grandchildren, maybe I'll tell her she could leave it for the grandchildren.
I'll tell you this, my maternal grandmother left everything to her 6 grandchildren, bypassed her 3 kids. To this day, I have to hear about it at every family holiday.
So I'll tell my friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's, listen, the only person that can ever get in the way of a will, I mean, maybe not the only person, but primarily the only person is going to be a spouse who is written out of a will. They have a recourse. Other than that, it's going to be difficult. I mean, unless you're a child of a person who wrote you out and there is a outstanding child support obligation, meaning that somebody owes a lot of child support, or there's an order that says that life insurance was supposed to be left. There's not a lot of ways for you to challenge someone's will. There's just not, unfortunately.
And so a trust, John, if you don't mind explaining a little bit, what does a trust look like?
So a trust can be formal or informal. Primarily what people use trust for is if you're going to leave money to children that are going to be minor, what you say is that you name a trustee. It can be anybody, maybe your brother or sister, somebody like your children's aunt or uncle, and you say that I'm going to leave all my money to my kids, but until they're 25 years old or 30 years old, the trustee is the only one that's allowed to give them any money. And you can even say what the money has to be used for. It can only be used for education, for health, for clothing, for, you can name what it's being used for. to buy them a car, whatever. And you designate all of that, and you give the trustee the authority to disperse the money to whoever it is, your kids or whoever, pursuant to your instructions. And then whenever your kids reach a certain age, or whoever reaches a certain age, then they get whatever's left. And that's what the trust is for, usually. So in the issue of so assume it's not your kids, what people will do is they'll leave like a property in trust, and they'll just say that where they don't actually leave it to anyone in particular. They just say that the trust will pass on to somebody else's heirs. But the trust remains, meaning that, let's say it's a property. So that means that property, whatever it is, can't be sold, can't do anything with it, but somebody's able to at least use the money from it, any income from it, or they can actually live on it, or whatever the case is. It's your way of controlling something after you die. That's what a trust is. It's like you're controlling something from the grave. You're still dictating what people can do. And that's all. That's what a trust is. But a trust can be really simple. You can put it right in the will. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
And John, with that being said, I'll go back to my question now. I, as a parent, separated, divorce, saying I'm going to create a trust that will provide life insurance for my child. Can that be done?
Well, I mean, you can't create life insurance, but you could leave things in a trust to your children.
Okay.
I mean, you absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's. I mean, in our conversation here is that you could, yes, you could do that, and most parents do that. But if you're the other parent, my message really has been that you can't rely upon someone doing that.
No, that I understand, John.
But you can absolutely do it. Yeah.
Right,
Well, I mean, but it's not life insurance though. Life insurance is actual life insurance. You would just be leaving your children money in a trust. It could be your house. It could be your retirement assets. Like you could name your children as a beneficiary of your retirement assets, but actually put those in a trust. So your children can't just, you're 14, none of us want our 14-year-old to take $100,000 401k. I mean, you would put it in a trust so that somebody else is at least protecting that money and using it for your children, hopefully in a responsible way. That's why why you always want to make sure the trustee is somebody you trust. Usually, I usually tell people to, name one of your siblings as the trustee, because they can't use the money themselves. They can only give it to whoever the beneficiaries are, but you want somebody you can trust.
Okay. I'm going to stretch this just a little bit further. Can I have the person that I've made a trustee purchase life insurance for my child from that trust?
Whose life are we purchasing the life insurance for?
The child.
Oh, so life insurance for the child, like maybe like a whole life policy or something?
Yes, whatever. Right.
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. I mean, the trust, you can direct the trustee to do anything.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because in real life, there are times where the two parents are not communicating, they're not getting along, but the responsible parent is trying to make sure that they do the right thing by their child. Yes, I know the statement is trust but verify, but if there's such a relationship between the two parties that the other parent is very adversarial and whatever is going on is I'm doing what's right for my child, so I'm putting everything in place that I know that's going to benefit my child.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, Michael. I will tell all of you a little secret that I've used over the years that not a lot of attorneys do, but it's something that you can do in that circumstances. You can actually ask a judge to to include the premium for a life insurance policy in the support obligation, so that if you're receiving child support, you're actually paying the life insurance for the other party. So you're not relying upon them to pay.
Right.
Because again, we're protecting a child. That's what the point here is. Protecting
Absolutely.
a child. So,
Right.
you know, there's, and this is, you know, this is where, you know, you really are benefited by having a, not just a good attorney, but a creative attorney, somebody who's thinking outside the box a little bit, because there are a lot of ways to protect, you know, what's going on in your specific circumstances. Because what you don't want to do is, you know, obviously be left when someone dies and not be able to support your child. And, you know, so you got to do that at the very onset, because obviously you know, none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. And you have to assume that somebody's not going to be here 6 months from now, as horrible as that sounds to assume. But whenever I deal with people, kind of to the point that we've been talking about, I tell everyone that walks into my office, you have to assume that the person that you're able to sit in a room and talk with today, and that you're amicable with today, you're going to hate tomorrow, or they're going to hate you tomorrow, or you're not going to be able to talk tomorrow. Your agreement should be assuming that you will not be able to get along tomorrow. And if your agreement doesn't assume that, it's not a good agreement. And people always tell me, well, you know, I always hear, well, we don't need a holiday schedule because, you know, we can work it out. And my response is always, I've heard this story hundreds of times. Yes, you can work it out today, but what happens in a year from now or 2 years from now? One of you, you know, gets into a new relationship, and now you've got all these other things going on. Deal with everything you can deal with today. And that's really what my message has really been tonight.
So I have John, what would you tell someone that's in the process of getting a divorce, who is also seeing someone else? Do they bring the children around them? Do they introduce the children to them? This is my future. How?
Well, first of all, shut your effing mouth. Don't be talking about the new one, okay? You know, the worst thing you can ever do during a divorce is let the other, put in the face of your future ex-wife or ex-husband the fact that you are seeing somebody else. Just keep your mouth shut. Secondly, don't you dare bring them around your kids. Don't you dare bring them around your kids. Not even in the context of, this is my friend XYZ. Don't even bring them around your kids, because it will get right back to the other parent and you have just blown up everything. I think that, you know, it's kind of like one step at a time. You need to get divorced. I mean, oh, fine, you're seeing somebody. That's fine. I mean, we all know when a relationship's over, sometimes you move on. Sometimes you move on before you start the divorce because in your mind, the relationship's been over for a long time. Fine. But, you know, rubbing it in someone's face, which I know is not what people mean to do, but that's what you end up doing. All you do is you inflame the situation. You create a much more hostile environment. And, you know, as an attorney, anytime I hear that, you know, the new boyfriend or the new girlfriend was introduced to the kids, and I see that in a letter from the other side, I literally want to drive over to my client's house and just punch them in the face and be like, why are you doing this? Do you want this to blow up? Do you want this to cost a fortune and take forever? Like, because that's what this complete inability to actually think is doing. And so that's my really nice way of saying, keep them hidden, be quiet. And the second you get divorced, then do whatever you want to do. Stay off of social media. Do not put any pictures of you and your new whoever at some beach in Cancun. I will.
Why
I mean,
not?
I have seen that a
Why
million
not?
times. Stop that crap. Don't be doing
Why
that.
not?
Go ahead.
Why not?
What?
Why not? Why not post your
Because
pictures?
because listen, if you're going through a divorce, you don't want to put lighter fluid on the fire. You don't. Like, why would you? If your marriage is over, your goal should be to try to get as amicable and as fair of a resolution as possible so that you can move on to the next chapter of your life. If you put it in someone's face that you've already moved on, they're not going to be responding with rationality, and they're not going to be responding with their, with their brain. They're going to be responding with their heart, and you're more likely to get into a big fight.
And see, John, I agree with you. And I think a lot of times people tend to make that mistake to think, well, in my heart, in my mind, in my soul, it's over. This is me doing what I want to do later for you, even though they may not overtly say that, but pretty much what they're doing is saying that. And like the question that Carmen said, why not? Because as you said, it inflames and creates a situation that does not need to be advertised or dealt with. Get it over and done with, and then do whatever you want to do. It is not about you personally moving on with your life. Another person is involved in this equation, and not thinking about that creates a lot of issues throughout the world. And a lot of times people end up getting hurt because of those decisions that they make. Yes, I'm done with him. I'm done with her. I can do whatever I want to do. This is my life. I'm not with you anymore, but you're still legally married. You're still going through the process. Wait till it's over, get it over as quickly as possible, and then do whatever you want to do.
That's correct.
So isn't that
Absolutely.
tricking someone when you're hiding, sneaking your lover around while you're in the process of a divorce?
Well,
No,
maybe,
it's not. You're
Asking
throwing
for
it
a
in their
friend, of
face.
course.
You're,
well,
you're
maybe,
throwing it up in their face, and it becomes hostile. Because at the end of the day, the person, whether it's a male or female, really didn't want to get divorced in the first place. So by you flaunting that person in front of them, they become angry, right? So they're going to do things to spite you.
and maybe you should learn to wait a little bit longer till this part of your life is over and done with. I've seen it time and time again, and that question is being asked. Well, it's my life. I'm done with him. I'm done with her. Why can't I do what I had to do? I had to last year say that to someone. It is put it on hold, get through your divorce, wait till it's over and done with. It is not about your personal feelings at this point. You're going through a divorce. Why make it more difficult, especially when you had a conversation with that person who said to you, you know what? I was contemplating terminating your life the other day. That is a total threat. That tells you and gives you a forewarning. Why do you want to exacerbate the situation? Sometimes we have to put aside our personal feelings and our wants and desires to get through a period in our life as simply as possible.
Correct. And you're also putting that other person's life at risk when it comes to that, because you don't know how that other person's going to really react.
And who else becomes involved? And I had to tell a young lady this the last couple of years. You're a married woman. I'm not getting involved with you. I do not want to be walking down the street looking over my shoulder, thinking that somebody's going to sneak up behind me and ask me or make a comment regarding you and I. No, you are married. I'm not getting involved with you. I don't care what you say or what you do. I'm not getting involved.
It's a dangerous thing.
I think it's a clear indication if you meet someone and they're flaunting their relationship before divorce, whether they're male or female, that's a clear indication of what they will do to you eventually.
There you go. There you go. And same thing with a child. If you have a child and you are putting me above your child, that tells me if I have a child with you, what will happen with that child? No, that is your child. Your child comes above me, before me, because that is your primary responsibility. You're not going to
Correct.
put that child aside and say, oh, they can handle themselves. Let's go out. No, your responsibility is to take care of that child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else who have not heard from tonight have any comments, any last minute questions? Because we're approaching at 10 o'clock. Michael, you've been
Yes.
very quiet.
Yes, what's with the common law marriage in New Jersey?
Doesn't exist.
Oh, it doesn't exist. Oh,
It does, but it does, but it's not a legality that you can utilize to get benefits.
Is
I
that, but
think-
is that, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Beth.
John, does that apply? Because I know with a lot of like gay relationship, they are entitled to benefits which straight people are not entitled to. Is that correct?
Not when it comes to common law marriage. So common law marriage is legal in, I want to say 9 or 10 states. And so yes, in New Jersey, you can't establish a common law marriage, but you could have been in a different state and come to New Jersey and it be recognized. It's very complicated. District of Columbia is a great example. They actually common law marriage still in District of Columbia, believe it or not. It's very complicated. But in terms of, you asked Beverly about same-sex relationships.
Right. For example, if I was living with a man, I couldn't put him on my insurance. But
So-
from my,
Yeah, you can't except we do have in New Jersey domestic partnerships, which I think most of you may have heard many years ago in the context of it being for same-sex people. However,
Right.
it was also for men and women that were over the age of 62. And so there is a new ability to, and that still exists. So you don't have to marry somebody if you're over the age of 62 and you're already, like, you can't be married to somebody else. But if you're not married and you're over the age of 62, you can enter into what's called a domestic partnership in New Jersey, where you would have access to medical benefits. You would have access to decision making. So if one of you's in the hospital, the other one could, make decisions on your behalf. You would have a tax treatment for estate purposes, just like if you were married. But that's it. You wouldn't have
Okay, wait
access
till
to
you're 62?
62 or older. You can enter into this. So it's like marriage light, basically. So it's like a couple of the really important parts of marriage, like estate taxes and health insurance, but it would not put any of your assets at risk. So like, you're leaving your kids, all your stuff, whatever. You wouldn't have to worry about this new person actually ever getting any of your money. So it's definitely something to think about. Also would not affect Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. So it doesn't affect any of those things. So it's really just limited things, but it's available. People don't even know it's available. But if you're 62 or older, it's available.
So it's kind of like
Question for you, John.
a living will kind of thing.
Yeah, basically.
Question for you, John. Does both parties have to be 62 or over?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just
So
for
we could be-
clarification.
And it's not a marriage. Like you literally just go down to your city clerk. You both just sign a form. It's pretty nice and easy.
So even if you're living with somebody from you in your 40s, you have to wait till you're 62.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both of you have to
But Bev, Bev, remember he's saying, don't do it. Don't live with somebody
No,
that
I
you're not
understand
married
that, but
to,
I'm
and
just,
definitely don't have children for them.
No, well, no, I was speaking in terms of, and he clarified that if I was living with a man, I couldn't put it on my insurance. We couldn't do this. Whereas the point was, if two men or two women was living together, they were able to put each other on the insurance. So
I
it's
mean,
kind of like,
yeah, I mean, you just have to, I mean, it's interesting. Like insurance is like the biggest issue in most marriages and in divorce. I can't tell you how many divorces don't occur because of insurance. I have a lot of people who stayed married for years, but under an agreement. Like they have an agreement that they're divorced, but they stay married for years because of health insurance. It is really the thing these days that really is a driver because it's financial. You know, we all, you know, especially if you've got a spouse that works, you know, that's a teacher or a police officer or works for state or federal government. They're like, you've got somebody that's got really good health insurance. You're talking about, you know, thousands of dollars a year of benefits just by virtue of whether you get divorced or not. And it's really important that you know, people take that into consideration. And so that really drives a lot of people's decision making in terms of whether they should get divorced and when.
correct. Okay. Interesting.
Don't think about it, Steve.
Okay, so any more questions before we end this? This is your opportunity to ask questions. Don't be shy.
One of the things, Beverly, that I want to mention, which I didn't get to mention before, is that the issue of innocent spouse when it comes to the tax situation, meaning that if you're about to get a divorce and you find that it's best for you to untangle your tax liability together, then you want to file separately. If you are filing joint continuously and you believe that the other spouse is creating a problem for the tax situation, then you want to document their the errors, whatever they're creating as a falsehood to separate yourself to show that you did not benefit from these earnings on the tax return, so that when it comes to filing for innocent spouse, you have documentation to prove that, yes, they claim that they tax liability should have been zero and when it should have been 100,000. And now because we filed jointly, you're holding me responsible for at least half of that. And also if I'm working, you're coming after me for the full amount. So you're allowed to file for innocent spouse, but you have to document and prove that you did not benefit from the earnings of that spouse. And sometimes it's better to say, we're at this point, I don't trust you anymore. Let's file separately. Obviously, that is going to be dependent upon your household situation, where if it's easy or it's not going to present a emotional or harmful or domestic violence situation, to file separately. This where you're responsible only for your tax liability. They're responsible for theirs. If there's something that prevents you from doing that, then get copies of the returns, document as much as you can, keep it outside of the household so that you can, when it comes down to it, you can prove that you did not benefit from this other spouse's erroneous behavior.
Okay. Don, can you put your information in the chat in case anybody wants to get in touch with you, please?
I sure can.
Okay. So you guys may have a friend, a family member that may need John's services.
So John, if I heard you correctly from the beginning, even though you're like an equal opportunity lawyer, you mostly help men.
No, so not in divorce. So in New Jersey, I would say of the almost 1,600 people I've represented, it's been 50-50, men and women. But really what I'm doing these days is mediation. So I'll go ahead and plug mediation for all of you talking to all your friends. So one of the things that's really important these days is people to understand that whenever divorce is here, and, you know, even if one person wants a divorce and the other person doesn't, because that I see that a lot too, you should still at least try to get an agreement on the process. You may not agree on anything else. You may not agree on what you're going to do with your kids or your money or anything else, but at least try to get an agreement on process. And try and so I would convey to your friends, your family, anyone that's out there, that if you're going to get divorced, try to talk to your spouse about, let's try to sit down with a mediator and let's try to figure this out before we both go and spend thousands of dollars on attorneys. Because once you do that, it's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle once you go down that road. I say that as an attorney because we are all programmed as attorneys to do things a certain way, to really, to really protect our clients. But at the end of the day, really mediation's where people need to be going. And so what I've been doing a lot lately, for several years now, is I mediate probably 2 to 3 times a week for couples that are going through divorce without attorneys, bring them in. Most of the time they can be in the same room. I'm not saying they are holding hands or anything, but they can be in the same room. And I put them into separate rooms on Zoom. We're on Zoom right now, but you can do what's called breakout rooms. I put them in separate rooms and I go and I speak to each of them individually. I figure out what they need in order to feel like they would have a fair result, kind of figure out their goals, get to know each person. And I just go back and forth and I figure out how these two people need to resolve their case so that they both feel like they're comfortable, so they can both move on. And quite frankly, this is not me gloating. This is not me patting myself on the back. But since COVID started, because it's been I always say, like, since March of 2020, it's kind of like before that time and after that time, right? So after that time, I've done 147 mediations. I just did one earlier today. 146 have settled because, quite frankly, I take the approach of every single case should settle in mediation, every single one. And I actually, I think if people sit there and they can get past the emotion of divorce, the rest of it is fairly simple. It really is. And most of us don't want to admit it. Some people think that it's not, but divorce is not difficult. What makes divorce difficult is emotion. 95% of divorce is emotion, 5% is everything else. If you get past the emotion, a mediator can get through everything else, help you reach an agreement that you both can live with and get done. Most mediations can be done in less than $5,000. Like, I don't mean just mediation, agreement, divorce, everything for less than $5,000. Or you can each go pay an attorney that much money and fight and fight and fight and fight and some more. So to answer your question, I don't just represent men in divorce, but in my divorce coaching business, I do just work with men. And the only reason I do that is because I recognize that men don't have the same resources out there to have someone get in their ear and really help them understand the healthiest way forward, the way that women do. And women have all kinds of other resources. Some of it is not formal. Some of it's just friends, because women have a little bit easier time talking to friends about what's going on in their personal life than men do. But some of it's formal. Like you go out there, most of the resources out there, because I talk to a lot of them. I talk to a lot of the divorce coaches, a lot of the therapists. Most of them are women. And a lot of men just feel more comfortable talking to other men about their situation. So because of that, I feel like I'm helping them not be men-centric, but help them get centered and help them understand how to identify their goals and how to identify what they really want. Not to try to screw a woman. That's not the issue. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is just for them to understand how to be a good father, how to be a good co-parent, how to be fair, and how to get past the emotions of divorce so they can do something that's going to be long-term good for their entire family. So I just recognize that we need that. And Beverly was actually kind enough to be a guest on my podcast, and people have told me repeatedly how much they loved her.
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's really, I hope that answered the question, because I'm, as you all know, I'm very verbose. I just talk a lot. So
No, as you were saying that, I'm glad you mentioned that. One of our conversation was when we was talking about a lot of people really don't want to get divorced. Like you were saying, they come to you and they're kind of looking for a co-signer to agree, for you to say, yes, you should, yes, you're done. Whereas we allow them to make their own decisions, instead of saying, oh yeah, I think you should. And a lot of times they really don't want to get divorced or separate, but they listen to their friends and their family. So you believe that you have to go in that direction because you don't want your family to be upset with you. You don't want the kids, or you don't want anybody to be upset with you. So you make the decision based on what you think they're expected of you.
Yeah, it's that whole adage. We all like listen, everyone's telling us, oh, you should divorce him or you should divorce her. We all listen to that. And
yes.
That's why, like, I tell people when they start going through a divorce, they should stop listening. I as hard as this is to hear, but you really should stop listening to your friends and family. You should, I tell everyone, you should go get a therapist, get an attorney that you trust, and maybe get one close friend. Like, but don't listen to like 5 different people, because all you're going to do is hear all these people telling you, pulling you in all these different directions. It's going to make you crazy. Instead, and you're going to lose sight of what you really want. You're going to be listening to what other people want.
I think before anybody go to see a lawyer, the lawyer should be the last stop off the train. I think you should go see a community leader. You should go see a pastor, someone that is hopefully fair and have some tools, a psychologist, a therapist. But the devote to be, life is like riding a train, right? Sometimes you have to make stops. A lawyer should be a last stop.
And one of the things, stop listening to people around you. Those are your biggest influencers,
Well, people who are not objective.
They're not. And the thing is, the people are giving you advice that they will not take for themselves, because those are the same people that don't tell me what to do. I know what to do, but they're willing to give other people's advice,
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Too often you come across that.
John, do you have a number?
I do. I can put that in the chat. Hold on. I think I just put my.
We see your email address.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah. Do you like that gethappydivorce.com?
Yes.
We just changed it. I mean, because I don't know if that's come across in our conversation, but that's my whole view is, people that are getting divorced are deeply unhappy. And, really at the end of the day, you being happy is good for your kids. And if you're not unhappy, that's really what it should be about. It shouldn't be about I hate somebody or someone did me wrong. It's just I'm not happy. I'm deeply unhappy. Because it affects every part of your life, doesn't it? It affects your professional life, your personal life, your emotional life. It affects your parenting, affects everything. And so really it's about getting happy. So we changed our website to Get Happy Divorce for that
But
reason.
John, isn't that happiness one-sided?
Well,
No.
listen, I mean, this is, after doing this for so long, I always feel that if one person's deeply unhappy, it's very likely the other person's unhappy too. They may not be willing to admit it, or they may be deeply in denial about it. And you know what? That's fine. That's fine. Not everyone's willing to admit when something isn't working, but I do think people should work on it. But at the end of the day, life's too short. We only live once,
Right.
and we're only on this earth for so long. If you're not happy, and you're miserable all the time, and you've tried to work it out, I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of if you get divorced. And I think that's just, I think that's an opinion I had before what I'm going through now. You cannot feel that way, because otherwise you're going to stay married for the sake of staying married. And when you're, on your deathbed, you're going to be regretting what you didn't do.
And I think too many people get very comfortable with being unhappy, and it becomes they're comfortable, because I know quite a few people that, and some of them is not very close friends, but friends, oh, we've been sleeping in a separate room for the past 10 years, for the past 15 years. That's no marriage. You're just sharing a space, and they're quite okay with it.
Well, some of us are willing to settle for whatever we feel that is our level of comfort, and don't want to rock the boat to say, hey, it takes an effort to make these changes. And that's the bottom line. Some of us don't have the courage or desire to do that because it requires us to put too much effort to change.
Or some of it
the
becomes
question
financial.
Beverly
What am I going to
asked-
do if I leave? What am I going to do? You have that mindset, and okay, the bills are getting paid. I'm living in a comfortable spot. I don't have to worry about nothing. I can basically go out if I choose to. So why, a lot of people have the mentality, it's not broken, just leave it alone, but in the interim of it, somebody's extremely miserable, while the other person is comfortable in their head.
Yeah, I've experienced that where people are living together, living in separate rooms, and the female is walking around half dressed and thinking, oh, I'm good. He can't do me anything. I can walk around here, and that's not going to bother me. It doesn't bother me. I moved on. But guess what? The other person is seeing that and say, hey, you're exposing yourself and I can't touch you. You think that's a happy situation for either party? But one party is like, oh, I can do whatever I want because, hey, I've moved on. He can't do me anything. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, that person can do something. You may not like it. And you don't want to get to that point.
There's consequences for that. No, there's consequences for that. Right.
Absolutely.
And, I also, I have a friend, and that's the thing. She's like, you know what? Her husband has not spoken to her in 17 years in the same house. He would not eat anything she cooks, right?
Wow.
He goes out and gets something to eat. She says sometimes she fixes nice romantic dinner, and he just and walk away from her. She'll dress sexy for his attention. He pays her absolutely no attention. So my thing to her was, why are you still there? Well, we have 3 houses together. We have this together, and it's all about the dollars and the comfort of being financially,
secure, but miserably
secure.
unhappy.
And right.
Obviously, she still loves her husband because she's doing those things for him. And he doesn't
17,
appreciate it.
come on,
So
17,
you just
17
need a
years.
Jill grind on the side. That's what I think. Just get your Jill grind.
17 years, and he doesn't even speak to her. It's a lot of
Well,
years.
maybe she should stop speaking to him and just dress
Holla,
natural. And maybe he will get a different idea. It's like, oh,
holla.
she's no longer dressing up for me. She's not making it
Maybe she just
making
needs
the
to get
effort.
a life.
Well, that's part of it, but then stop doing those things to please him because it doesn't please him.
Amen.
So why keep doing it?
Hello.
Hey,
Unfortunately, I don't even think divorce makes some people happy. I'm sorry. I think
well,
even when some people are divorced, they're not happy.
well, there are people who, no matter what situation, they're not happy because they're
You're
not
not
happy within
happy.
themselves. And once you're
Correct.
not happy within yourself, nothing will make you happy.
That's correct.
But it's better to be out of that situation that's been exacerbated by the conflict between two parties and be by yourself. And at least maybe you can find some peace and comfort being by yourself. And at some point, the epiphany may arrive where it's like, you know what? I have to do something to make my life better. Nobody's going to do it for me.
Correct. Okay, guys, we way past our time tonight. Okay, so with that, I just want to thank everyone and thank you, John. Thank you, Michael,
You're welcome.
for your knowledge. Hopefully
You're
the
very
people who are
welcome.
listening, gain some type of insight that they can share. And anybody's listening and want to reach out to John, he has his number, which is 732-529-6937. Michael, you can also put yours in there in case somebody needs to reach out to you.
I'm on my cell phone, so I don't see a chat box to enter anything, but my telephone number for the office is 732-733.
1 minute, Michael. Let me write it in the chat. Okay, sweetie? 1 second.
732-733. I got that much.
6988.
Okay.
And it's Michael at catgllc.com. MICHAEL at CATGLLC.com.
Okay, say that again. I got the CA at CA.
TGLLC.com.
Okay, got it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you guys again. Much appreciated. And we'll talk
Wonderful.
soon.
It's wonderful for you guys to come. Some people came and they left and they came back and other people keep going. But it's wonderful that you guys are here. Bev, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I learn a lot. And I can say to young women, like your ex-girlfriend, don't do it. Don't live with a guy that you're not married to, and don't have kids for a guy you're not married to.
Absolutely. Eric, I will speak to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
All right. And that's what we do. We give information.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And also, Dennis Charles, who was here earlier, when is he coming on, Bev?
The 21st.
The 21st.
Okay, so our next event, is for toxic relationship. Okay, so on the 7th. So
Be there,
all right,
be
guys.
square.
Okay, Beverly, could you send me the information to the person you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I will. Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Hi, John Kelly. Good to see you.
Yes, sorry, I just came in the studio and
Listen, man, I've been inviting you to this for months. Don't play yourself.
Pardon me?
I said I've been inviting you here for months. Don't play yourself.
No, but I do so many different things. Like I just come in and I come into the studio and I saw the invite. So I say, oh, let me check it what this is. So yeah.
Don't let this be the last one, okay?
Next time, I'll send it to me first.
Man.
Yes, I'll be there.
Lord, I love my Spice Island.
Yeah. I'll be there
guys.
next time. I'll be there next time.
You'll be there, right?
Yeah, man.
Okay, sweet sauce.
All
See you
right.
next time. I'll send the invite again.
All right, say it, keep saying it. All right.
Okay, good night. Take care,
99